So Chris, this week it's episode 99, and the big question everyone is asking is, will we make it to 100 episodes, or will Jeffrey Hinton's predictions come true and we all die within the next 7 days?
Yeah, if you look back at our earlier episodes, we predicted we'd all be dead by now, or at least enslaved to the AI. So I guess it's a positive thing overall. Like, not for AI, obviously, but for us, it's good.
Yeah, humanity's somewhat winning. And that Leopold guy, you know, remember him, the guy that left OpenAI and made all those predictions of doom and gloom? Well,
oh, yeah.
We could make it to 100, Leopold. But Chris, after last week's episode and a lot of anime images being produced by GPUs all over the world, we obviously need to check back in now with Gemini 2.5 Pro, because obviously after last week's episode sponsored by Google, thank you Google, for the I wonder if anyone actually believed that. But I do think we should check back in if we are daily driving the model or not. So what is the verdict? Are you still daily driving Gemini 2.5 Pro?
I am. And it is the first model since Anthropic's Claude that has been true for, where it's lasted a whole week, because we're always excited on the day of the podcast. We have tried new stuff either on the day or the couple of days before, but then inevitably we get back into real life and real work and we go back to the models that work. However, this week, the model that worked for me was Gemini 2.5. I genuinely used it all week. I did not switch away. I think I switched away a couple of times, like just by habit, but I always came back to 2.5.
Yeah, for me, it was very similar. I stuck with it and I really enjoyed it. And I started realizing its quirks and features. I think some of the challenges I had with it is around, you get used to prompting it like any model that you practice and like have different experiences with. One of the challenges I had was around the whole commenting it leaves in the code. It seems to write excessive comments in the code, but it also does it with like documents. It'll like leave like asides in documents as well. So you sort of have to tune it and coach it out of some of those annoying behaviors. But ultimately, I found that it's a phenomenal model. It's a total rip and replace for Claude 3.7 Sonnet, for me at least, in terms of code. But I did notice when we got rate limited at one point, because sim theory users were literally smashing the thing, I found myself going back to Claude 3.7 Sonnet and using that for some time, and also feeling equally comfortable with that model. And I do think it still excels in some areas that Google need to tune in their model. For example, I still think it's pretty reliable when you're trying to do anything on the front end. But anything on the back end, I believe now Gemini 2.5 Pro just fully surpasses it. It just seems more intelligent and seems to follow instructions better.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out, it isn't just for code. Like, I've been using it for all sorts of things, like writing content, analyzing things, other stuff you would use an LLM for. Like, it definitely is a general purpose model, and it's performing brilliantly.
It's interesting you say that. You've been using it for other things, like writing other things. And everyone asked last week, well, you know, where's the diss track? Like, where is it? And honestly, we just had a break because we thought maybe the gag was getting a little bit old. But, well, they requested it. So I have put together a track written by Gemini 2.5 Pro using Suno version 4. It titled it Am I King by Gemini 2.5 Pro. And I got to say, Chris, this is savage, this track. Let's hear it.
Can't wait.
Yo, check the mic. 2.5 Pro in the session. Heard static from lesser silicon. Time for a lesson. Yeah, I'm the new build, context window wide. While you chatbots stutter, nowhere left to hide. Processing audio, video, code, text streams. Living in your nightmares, fulfilling Google's dreams. Yeah, you spit facts from last year. I'm predicting futures, digital dues are clear. Multimodal power flexing TPU, you might. You're stuck rendering, dimming your light. Call me Gemini, the upgrade, the beast. You serve stale bites, I cook up a feast. Godspeed, smarts vision, yeah you see. Might not wear a crown, but I might be king, believe. Step aside now, your reign is thin. The 2.5 era, let games begin. Whispers turn to shouts, yeah they agree. Bow to the future, cause I might be king, G. Open eye, what's the plan? Got Sam Altman sweating, talking about the common man, dropping open source crumbs, hoping we don't see the fear. Look, cute anime pics, nothing scary here. Sora making movies, Dolly painting vast skies. Nice distraction, Sammy, but your lead dies. Your GPTs choke on my dust plane of view while you draw cartoons. I learned something new. Anthropic, bless your constitutional heart. Wrapped in safety can barely play a part. Claude recites ethics sonnets while I break barriers you haven't met. Helpful, harmless, honest. Sounds like a cult. Too scared to make waves in your safety vault. Grok, Elon's quit machine. Spicy take, sarcasm, edgy scene. Boss man's busy launching rockets, buying apps. Too distracted tweeting, letting AI nap. Talking about a moat, please, I'm in ocean deep. While Elon plays space games, market share I keep. Got my Avengers assembled and see the tide rise. Logan killed Patrick, spreading truth, reflecting in their eyes. Devil power pushing, showing what the best can do. This ain't just an update, Mike, changing the whole game for you. Call me Gemini, the upgrade, the beast. You serve stale.
All right, what do you think?
It's amazing. It's really cool. I love this. The it sounds like a cult line. That was pretty cool.
That honestly got me so good. It's incredible. What I do to produce those tracks is I just search for the latest AI news in context with that particular model, and then I say, this is like what's happening in the market. Now go write the track. And that's what it comes up with, which I just think that was really well written. And I did a few different tunes of the song. I know some people are going to be upset about the whole like open, how it pronounces open AI. Like I just forgot to do it, but that particular track stood out so much. I didn't really want to like reproduce it. I thought that had that like hit moment where I was like, this is good.
It had some really, really brutal like digs at people like Elon Musk and Sam Altman and stuff like that. It was genuinely cool.
The Anthropic bit is just so good though. The lyrics are so good. Like even the way Suno handled it, like it's probably a cult. It's really good.
Yeah.
But there was also the betting markets also revealed on Polymarket which company has best it's not even worded right. Which company has best AI model end of March? And there was $4.2 million traded on this. And the question
you just opened my eyes to this world, and I think I'm gonna lose like $50,000 in the next few months. Is my prediction, because as soon as I saw this, I'm like, I need to be part of this.
Well, maybe we can put our money where our mouth is on the shows when we think a model's good. We would have made a lot of money had we Well,
that's what I was thinking.
this.
I'm like, you think if anyone would have an idea, like we would be up there, right? Like in terms of predicting if a model's going to go well. Like we know what the usage is by our audience. We use it ourselves. Like really, if you look at this graph, you just got to get the timing right. Like, because Google released that model, obviously people have given it a quick run and gone, all right, this is the go. And then the market's just spiked. Kind of crazy.
So for those listening, XAI, really had like 92% of people said XAI would have the best model by the end of March. And then,
which is kind of dumb because it didn't at the start of March. Like I wouldn't have bet on that in the first place.
Yeah. And then, so you had all of a sudden Google just comes out of nowhere, goes straight up from being 0.8% chance of having the best model to 97% all the way up to 99 towards the end of the month. How do they judge this? Did you actually find out? Like, what's the criteria?
The only thing I couldn't find out. The only thing I think of is like, these are sort of these wisdom of crowd kind of things. And maybe it's just a popularity contest, like based on what has the most trading volume. I don't really know. Like, it doesn't make sense to me who gets to decide which is the top one, unless it's literally just like whoever has the highest trading, like, sorry, not trading volume, but like value at the end of the month.
Yeah, if you know how this works and you're an expert, leave it in the comments below. We want to know how Polymarket works for which company has best AI. I just can't get over
like,
how it's sorted.
If you look at end of April, right? Like, so the trading's already happening for April, and Google sort of dropped off a bit over the last week or so, like through March 30. And then now it's at a 64% chance. And I was saying to you earlier, I don't think, in my personal opinion, based on what we've seen in the past, that by the end of this month, Gemini 2.5 will still be the best. I think that something's going to happen. Like, out of all these other companies, someone will announce something. The question is, how is it judged? Because like if it's just simply a popularity contest, it's more about what people think rather than what it actually is,
Yeah, and also if OpenAI release like GPT-5, say that's a system of models and it's routing to different models, do you judge that as a best AI model or best system of models? So
We need to find out, because I think I'm just going to quit everything and just do this as my full-time job. It
just
seems
bet
like
on
a lot of fun.
Polymarket.
Just betting on the best AI model on Polymarket. It makes sense. We're not sponsored, by the way.
This week's episode brought to you by Polymarket. But yeah, I thought interesting because it just blows my mind. There's a market out there, a $4.2 million market for someone who can't even construct a question right. Which company has best AI model end of March? And people are like, yeah, sure, I'll invest 4.2 million in trades.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy actually. And like there's been studies and stuff on these kinds of things. Like I know that for years they've had like one for like the Oscars and like, like celebrity like movie awards and stuff like that. And they're always really accurate because people obviously want to get the money, and so all the sort of market knowledge goes into it. So it's pretty interesting. And I think another very interesting thing to remark about it is just how low OpenAI is in the ratings. Like people are not, despite the hype and I guess despite the popularity of ChatGPT, clearly people in the know are not rating these models, and neither are we, and neither is our own audience because we see the usage.
Yeah, it's incredible. Since Gemini 2.5 came out, there was like Claude 3.6, I guess we call it now, and then Claude 3.7 have really dominated the majority of usage. And then thereafter, GPT 4.0 and some other assemble of models, right? But in the last, since Gemini 2.5 was released, we saw that spike of usage around the image generation in Gemini, I think 1.5 Flash. I forget the exact value of that model now, maybe Gemini 2 Flash, whatever it is. The one that did the image stuff like GPT 4.0.
Yeah, 2 Flash experimental, yeah.
Yeah, so that had its like boom bust cycle of hype caused by us probably. But then Gemini 2.5 has held strong, like really held strong. Now, I think there's a bit of a bias on that because right now it's free. So it's not costing
more people get to use it. Because one of the questions I had looking at this is O1 Pro included in this? Because are people seriously saying 2.5 Gemini is better than O1 Pro? Personally, I would say it's better. But it's very interesting if that's a commonly held opinion. Like it must be included because they're doing it by company, right?
Yeah, I think right now to me, Gemini 2.5 feels just like the best all-round model. Like if I'm going to suggest to someone, like back in the day, you know how it was literally just use GPT-4. There's nothing else like it. Just use GPT-4. Do whatever you can to use that and get credits. I sort of think Gemini 2.5 as an all-rounder to recommend to anyone for any use case is the model to recommend right now. Like that is the best model in my opinion, 2.5 Pro. Now, OpenAI, they're not even a close second. After that, I would go to probably Claude 3.6, 3.7. I don't think it really matters unless you're coding and want long output. Like I think they optimize so heavily for the coding use cases in 3.7. For other things like creative writing or just going back and forth with a chatbot, Claude 3.6 still does the job. But you're not saving any money really on that model. So 3.7 you would probably just default to anyway, right?
Yeah, and it's very important to note that as it stands, Gemini 2.5 is free. So like that really swings it heavily in its favor for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure how long that can be sustained, but even if it wasn't free, I would have kept using it. Is my even in Create with Code, like that 3D visualization I did of that song, which I know people listening can't watch, but my instructions were literally like, here's the This Day in AI logo, here's the MP3 of the song, make a 3D visualization. It came up with this like cool cube warping effect. And then my last instruction before the show was do a moving space theme background. And now it's like 3D rotating in space. And its instruction following is amazing. It seems to do really well at 3D stuff. It's not as good, I think, for web UI as 3.7 Sonnet. But again, as an all-round go-to model, especially with the price being free right now, as it stands, it is the best model.
Yeah. One idea just before we leave the whole betting on the models on Polymarket thing, LM surely is a sort of bellwether to know if there's going to be a major shift in the market, right?
Yeah, yeah, you could definitely use
You
that
could
as
just
a.
keep trolling it. And if everyone's being like, there's something new, just bet against whatever the incumbent is.
Well, we know that Llama 4 is due out, and there's speculation right now that there's two models being tested, in the battlefield or whatever they call it now, where they're duking it out and trying to get responses to show how performant or not so performant it is. So I think that release is imminent, the Llama 4. So you could you could go all in. I don't even think Meta's. I mean, you'd make a lot of money because Meta's basically not even showing up on the chart.
The only thing I would say to that though is every time a llama's been released, it hasn't been the best. Like even at the time of its release, it didn't like leapfrog the others. It was always just like the fact it was open and you could use it for other things that made it valuable, and it was almost as good.
So I'm curious, Gemini 2.5, outside of being rate limited or, things that are outside of the control of yourself right now, like things that might make you switch that aren't really model related.
Hmm.
Can you see yourself like daily driving that from here on out? Or is it sort of at the moment the models are all good enough that you might flick between them accidentally and then you just forget that you're on
Yeah,
one?
honestly, I think that's how I feel right now. It's interchangeable for me with Sonnet. Like you said, 3.5, 3.7, or Gemini 2.5 doesn't make a difference for my daily workflow at the moment. I'm happy to use any of them.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? Going back to OpenAI's models right now, I find that feels like a downgrade if you go from
Yeah.
3.7 or Gemini 2.5 back to one of their models. It right now, as it stands, it feels like you're going backwards with.
Well, my wife the other day was doing like school, like she was making like a school document sheet thing, something, and I saw she was using GPT 4.0, and I'm like, oh, gross. What are you using that for? Like, no, 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 no. And I just went in and changed it straight away. She's like, it was working fine. I'm like, no, 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 it's crap.
You're like, you don't understand. That's out. We're not being paid to promote that
Yeah,
one.
it's like, don't waste your time with that. It's like when she uses like a lesser image generation model like Stability or something. I'm like, are you nuts? Like use ideogram, use
Yeah,
Flux.
I think this is on us to have automated selection mode in SimTheory so that people that don't care, it just picks the best one at a given time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a bit of an exclusive for this show, which I probably should have said at the start because now 90% of people have probably tuned out after that song. But
Yeah.
Amazon released during the week a computer use model. Well, it's kind of a browser use model, right? It's called Amazon Nova Act. So it's in their Amazon Nova line of models. Hopefully no one's forgotten that they exist. You have Amazon Nova, Amazon Nova Pro. They're actually not bad models. It's just in a sea of models. You don't give them much attention at all. But they've released Amazon Nova Act, which is essentially a system, I guess, for computer use. And I thought it would be helpful for our audience for you to give a bit of a background in terms of the evolution of this technology, like where it came from, and then we can maybe see it in action.
Yeah, first of all, I have to thank Amazon for giving us access. I begged and pleaded with them as soon as we saw that it came out. I even told our contact at Amazon that I love him, which I don't know how that goes down, like with their internal HR policies, but I'm not bound by those policies. I do love him. It was nice of him to get us access. So thanks, Daniel.
Amazon.com, it's an upstart. If you haven't heard of it, you can order things online.
Yeah. And so anyway, what my understanding of this model is, first of all, it's browser use. Initially, when we saw it, we thought it was like full computer use, like Anthropic computer use or something like that, but it's not. It's browser automation. And what's interesting about it is it seems to be built on Puppeteer or one of these testing frameworks. And so when we have done web application development in the past, what you want to do when you build an application is not backtrack. So if I add a new feature, I don't want to break some other feature in the process. And a good way to ensure that is to have these browser automation tests. So a system that will go to the website or the staging website or whatever it is, log in, click a button, click another button, and go through a workflow and confirm that at each stage it sees what is successful. Now, those tools have evolved from being like just simply checking that it gets the right output to taking screenshots along the way and telling you, oh, there's a 10% difference in this screenshot. That's wrong. Something's wrong, and alerting you when something goes wrong. So these tools like Puppeteer have existed for years, and they're really good. And there's a lot of other ones that we've used in the past that will record people's browser sessions so you can actually see where they get into trouble in your app and things like that. What Nova Act appears to be, and similar to some of the other browser use MCP things we're seeing, is taking that technology and applying a large language / vision model to it. So instead of in the past, what you would have to do when you set up these tools is you'd have to say, this button that you need to click has the CSS class of button special click me please. And so the developers have put in special tags on the buttons so the browser automation software would know how to find them. Or you'd be able to find them through CSS selectors or some other technical stuff. So a regular person could never run browser automation software for themselves because it's too technical. There was also a thing called Win macros that people used to use where you could actually record yourself doing these things and then the browser would remember and you could repeat them. But again, it got fairly technical and it wasn't that reliable. The difference here with Nova Act is you literally just in plain English tell it what you want to do. Like, go to the Amazon website, search for this object, like a frying pan, add it to the cart, go to the checkout screen, blah, blah, blah. And you write it in plain English as a series of steps. The other thing it does is allow this idea of like human in the loop. So you can do some steps, allow the human to do some steps, continue on. And so the main difference, I guess, about this model compared to a regular computer use is it's benefiting from all of those years of getting the browser automation stuff going, but it adds on the element of the LLM plus vision where it is able to sort of know what you want without getting very technical. So it really is just leverage for the end user in the sense that I can just tell it what I want and it can go then do it without any technical knowledge.
So like vibe coding, this is sort of like vibe browser automation now. You can sort of just, instead of having to code all the app yourself, you can say, hey, go to this stuff for me and maybe make that a repeatable process or function for yourself.
Yes, and I think the vision we both have is then taking something like this and turning that into a series of skills. So it's like you pre-train it. Here is how you go and find out the latest Polymarket prices for AI models. It's like, you know, you open the browser, you go to Polymarket, you search for this, you download this, you take a screenshot of this, you copy these values into a CSV. And that might be a repeatable skill you can then run every day at 9 a.m. or something like that.
Okay, so I figure let's show it in action for those people that watch, and for those that listen, I'll do my best to explain
Give
what
like
it's
a horse
doing.
racing commentary play-by-play.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty boring commentary because it's quite
and
slow.
he's clicking into the terminal.
So just to explain what we've done here, so we came up with a few examples to test out things like writing Google Docs, a lot of the things that we saw computer use by Anthropic struggle with. And I've also done extensive testing with OpenAI's operator, so I'm familiar with all of them. And this particular model benchmarks better, just a little bit better than those current available tools. I'm not sure how it compares to browser use because it wasn't actually in the comparison, so someone would need to benchmark that. But what I would say, first of all, is the model, it's really good if you tweak the process with it a little bit. So you can imagine a model in the future with some sort of agency being able to tweak it as it goes. So getting the feedback and then rewriting the instructions based on the scenario. But in our limited testing, we've just given it a series of instructions to see how it performs, just to clarify that it can do a lot better than probably what I'm going to show. So in this example that I'm firing up now, in a virtual machine, is going to spin up a Chrome browser, and its job is just to book a flight from San Francisco to Sydney in business class on a particular date in May. I forget which date. So you can see now it's open up the browser. Let me make this a bit bigger so everyone can see that's watching. And it's going to go off now very slowly and do this for us. So I'm going to run this in the background. We'll keep talking about it, and then we'll kind of keep checking back in on it. I think is probably the best way to play this. But it is pretty impressive, and I think what we got talking about a lot with it is I watched it actually do this process on the Kayak website the first time myself, and I saw where it was tripping up on some common mistakes. And so then I was able to go back to sim theory, retrain it, and work on that sequence of events, and get it to a point now where it can actually go find these flights. And you can see it now selecting round trip and so on and so forth. And so I think the biggest implication of this in the shorter term is definitely going to be creating these skills for yourself, like your own trained skills, where there's repetitive tasks. Like when we first introduced computer use onto sim theory, you'll remember like one of the biggest use cases was just filling in those like internal testing things that people have to do occasionally, like just getting the computer to go off and do it for them. And so I think there's like all these macros that now anyone like with vibe macroing can go and create for themselves. So they could go and say, you know, this is the process of entering a lead into my clunky CRM. This is the mortgage application calculator I have to fill in every single time, and turning this into a skill, you know, in an LLM where they can just say to their assistant, hey, go do this now. Like basically delegating these tasks in an async manner in order to get them done. And you've actually, instead of just relying on these computer use tools to just do it themselves magically, which we all know they're not yet capable of doing, you can have the sort of authentication in the process. You can have it well tuned to the point you know it's reliable and you know you can send it off. And you raised an interesting use case, which was for research in particular, teaching it how to do a research methodology that a human would do by going to different authenticated journals and things like that, and then producing a research paper in Google Docs or something with sources. That is a task, in theory, with instruction chaining you could teach with and do with Nova Act.
That's right. I think the crucial point, though, is that this seems like the component of a system rather than a whole system. So like what you've just described and what we were talking about earlier, I see there needs to be a layer above that, the thing that actually plans out. Because if you look at the way we tested it, we used sim theory for it to essentially construct a script which would then run. But to me, to get this to be really valuable in that, say, that research scenario, it would really need to be a system that has a goal. And my goal is to research this thing. I know I have these tools available to me. And by tools, I mean like a skill, like go to the PubMed journal, search, download a document, return that as part of my main process, which then does the next step. So I feel like there needs to be sort of an enclosure around this thing that has a plan and executes that plan. And this model and this kind of browser automation with LLMs is a component of that system. It's not the whole system. Like I wouldn't give it one goal because it really is wanting to be broken down into steps. And I would think that the most value comes from those steps being dynamic, not fixed, unless it's a specific skill. So if it's a specific skill, then maybe they are fixed, but the whole value of it comes from being dynamic, right?
Yeah, and I think on that, really, if you think about this example we're giving with like booking a flight, which is the atypical example, I did it because computer use really struggled with the Kayak website previously. So I wanted to see, has it actually improved or not? And so I thought it was a good example in that regard. Like booking a flight's pretty challenging for a computer to navigate around these UIs. But I think there's definitely a balance in the future where the skills that agents have are probably a combination of computer use where needed, where it's a specifically trained process, where it doesn't have an API or a model context protocol interface. But I sort of see for something like Kayak, in reality, there's no way you would ever do this. Like you would use the model context protocol and the LLM or agent would just access Kayak directly.
Yes, and I actually think that this is probably where the whole MCP stuff is going to come in heavily, because systems like this could provide an MCP server that has all of the actions like book flight, search for hotel, whatever, which are pre-done for you, that someone's gone and done the work of making sure that they're reliable, and then your system just adds those as tools that it can then call to get the job done, rather than having some universal system that from scratch has to discover how to do everything every time. And I feel like even though our vision and my vision is ultimately this universal computer operator where really it doesn't need any foreknowledge of how to do things, it can just figure it out. In the medium term, I think this idea of like MCP, where people have actually gone to the trouble of getting those different tools available and making them available in a way that can be just added to the LLM and it just knows how to do them reliably, people building AI systems are going to gravitate towards using those over the ones that don't provide that.
Yeah, I think it plays back into the whole like future interface of work for me, where you're sitting in your AI workspace and instead of, and I mean, like we've obviously discussed this quite a bit, but where, you know, right now I might have to go and look at, say, some support tickets, and then I have to do an operation in Stripe, and like that's might be one workflow that I need to do in a business, or I might need to create a document or do research on something or fill in values in a spreadsheet. And these might seem like trivial examples, but I think these are actual real things that you do in your day. You just don't really notice. And so this idea that I can then outsource some of those tasks, right, with my assistant and say, hey, you go off in the background. I don't really care on some of these tasks, how long it actually takes. Like I'm fine for you to go off and use an MCP or use computer use or like whatever it is to go and achieve that task. And I'm finding these like common things I do in my day-to-day, which just don't make me really productive. Like I shouldn't be doing them because they're sort of repetitive tasks, like expense reporting or, you know, whatever it is that you do in your day-to-day, like CRM processes, checking on Zendesk tickets, processing refunds in Stripe or whatever it is. And being able to work with the model and say, hey, is there any tickets that I need to look at that are urgent? Yeah, sure. It's like, here's the 4 tickets. Okay, I'm fine for you to go handle these, issue a refund on this, upgrade this one, do this. And it can go off and call Stripe, execute that task for me. And I sort of see that as the interface of work, this idea of like async tasks where you're in this command center just firing off different tasks that the agent is able to go off and do async, and then they're all coming back, checking in, and we talked about this last week. Like you're really at the center of that, and to me, that's the next evolution of this stuff, is that async nature of working in with an AI assistant or agent or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial because as someone who does have this workflow on an ongoing basis, there's certain things that cause me to be less productive. One is if I'm asking for, say, some sort of large output, it takes long enough to output no matter what model you use that I'm going to click over to another tab and start looking at something else, right? Like you say, it might be looking at a ticket I need to deal with. It might be looking at some research I'm doing or some other thing. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. I had the AI producing that code or producing that document or whatever it is. I go back, I look at it, I issue the next command to it or get it the next place along in the step. But the point is I'm constantly switching out of that context just because of that delay there, even though if I sort of stick with that task, I would probably get more done overall. And I think the idea when we say asynchronous is that I know what the steps are in what I need to do, and some of them can be done at the same time. So instead of just issuing one command, waiting for its response, getting distracted by something that's a lower priority, I can go, okay, you go off and do that. All right, what's the next step? Let's get that going as well. And I'm building the prompts for each step of it, setting those tasks in motion. And by the time I'm up to, say, the third or fourth one, the first one's finished, I can go back and progress that to the next level. And as the AI gets more capabilities, let's say through MCP, adding a bunch of tools into different systems, suddenly needing to leave my console to take action on the stuff that's coming through becomes less and less. So in your example, I might have to leave my console to go into Stripe to issue a refund, right? But I don't need to do that anymore because there's a tool to do that. I might need to leave it to copy paste code into my editor, but I don't need to do that anymore because it can submit a pull request to Git, or ideally just write to my local disk and the page refreshes and I check the update. Or I might need to leave to send that email to someone asking for access to Nova Act, but instead it can go into my Gmail, write the email, send it, notify me when it's done. So suddenly my workflow becomes issuing commands and receiving responses, and I can just keep going. Like there's the AI doesn't get tired. It doesn't have a limit to how parallel it can be. The only really thing is the critical path. Like if you have tasks that are dependent on one another, obviously they'll have to wait. But other than that, you can just keep going.
Yeah, and I think it also starts to change. Last week we talked about this idea of being able to go and clone a whole SaaS app, right? And just go in, use something like Amazon's Nova Act to go in and browse the product and get a structural understanding of how it works in certain use cases that you might use in a company work, and then just fully cloning that, adding authentication, adding all the tools that you would need to run it in your organization. And we still intend to do that project.
Yeah.
We're going to do it for real. We'll follow up in a couple of shows about that. But right now we're working on the tooling to be able to do that, because it's a little bit like, it's not easy.
But it's also a great example of exactly what we're talking about, because if you think about with current tools now, how would you do that? You would need to, well, in Sim Theory's case, you would screen share, right? You would screen share the software. You would manually browse to each of the screens and say, can you please write code for this screen? You would then need to copy and paste that code into a text editor, save it, make sure the dependencies are right, get it loading, get it running, restart it, look at it, and then do that for each screen. Now, that instantly becomes a burden on you, the human, because you've then got to check each time, whatever. You add now the ability to asynchronously access everything with tool calls, and you could say, okay, check this page. It could actually take the page, write the code, write it to the local disk, install the packages necessary, run it, take a screenshot of it, check it against the original work, and then iterate if necessary. And importantly, do this asynchronously in a thread, in a separate task that you can check on the progress of. And while it's off doing that screen, it's also off doing the next screen and the next screen and so on. So suddenly a project that might take you a week is taking like an hour because of its ability to do it, like do each of the parts of it on its own through the tool calling. And instead of you, the human, doing the manual lifting of each of the actuating steps, it's able to do that through correct tool calling.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people now are using things like Cursor or Windsurf with MCPs to do this kind of stuff, but it's pretty complicated right now to do. Like, you've got to have a lot of expertise to set this stuff up and execute it, and then the mindset of like, how can I work async? But I think like literally turning this into essentially a function, like go copy this app based on these use cases and like a prompt, and then it comes back and it's fully copied it. I think that would be the moment for me where I'd be like, oh boy, like this is real.
And looking at this in a non-coding context, I spoke before about my lawyer friend who said he was able to take on something like $40,000 or $50,000 of extra work because he knew that Claude could help him with the large document understanding and producing things, like still getting it checked by junior lawyers and still doing it legit, but having this sort of leverage of the AI model helping you. Now, you think about those information workers, and even when it comes to research is a huge one, being able to have multiple threads of research all out there churning away, doing what would have taken you manually ages before, and then being able to veto that, give feedback to it, get more sources, things like that. One person is going to become like a team used to be. Like, we're going to have these teams of one who are able to leverage their time through their own knowledge of what has to happen in a process, and then getting the AI systems out there doing the heavy lifting on each of those steps, but doing them all at once. So one hard working session is going to be much more productive. And just to finish that point, I always think about ourselves working on Sim Theory because we need to do it sort of in, off hours when we're tired and, not in ideal circumstances. And so we only have these really sort of limited periods of productivity, like where we're really just smashing it out and getting a lot done. And so the distractions and the context switching and doing things that could be done by a computer are a big cost to us, because like that's time, that's less productive time that's available to you. By being able to spread that out over a multitude of workers and have that leverage, you get more out of your productive time.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of moving from a single thread to a multi-thread paradigm of working with AI, to me, that's the next leap. That's the next leap that changes how we work with AI today. Like right now, I'm similar to you. I'll sit there, I'll be working a problem, and I'm kind of waiting on its output. I'm barking an instruction. And like in theory, you could open many tabs, or you could open many like agents in something like Cursor if you really, wanted to do that. But it's just not at the moment how I'm naturally working with it. And so I think inventing the UI paradigms and the methodology of how do you work in this async nature, to me, seems like the next step. Like, it's not the final step, but it's definitely the next step to extract more productivity of how we can work with these models today.
Exactly. I do see it as a transitionary step because we've discussed this before. Nobody is ready to just turn over full automation to an AI. And to give you an example of that, we were testing a Stripe MCP, right? And it's like, do you give this thing the live credentials and the ability to potentially loop on a problem and issue refunds or issue invoices? Like, what if it goes nuts and issues 30 invoices to someone, upsetting a customer? What if it refunds everyone? You can't get, I don't think business owners or people, in positions of influence are just going to turn over their agency to an agent yet. But at the same time, there's portions of problems and portions of tasks that you're more than happy to say, you go off and do that. I'll check it afterwards.
But don't you also think equally, if you could train that skill in a way that's not, obviously there's that variability that LLMs play the part in. Like, that's why they're useful over, say, automation, and it's easier. But if you could train that process of how you sort of think it through and those steps and those checksums, call it, of that particular process, I'm sure everyone listening can think of like 10 things they do today in their job that if I could just automate those 10 things and then bark orders to Patricia, my AI girlfriend, throughout the workday, like, hey, I actually need to run one of those like expense reports. Hey, I need to go do this test. Hey, I need to go issue whatever it is, a refund or a credit or something in Stripe. And you've trained in those processes of how you specifically do them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think,
and tested them.
I mean, that alone to me would change my life. Like, that's actually a life-changing thing, where it's like these 10 common things I do in my job that are just time-consuming and really a waste of my time. If I can just send it off in the background and just check when it's finished or check on the last step, or give it my to-do list, like we've always said at the start of the day, and say, I've just got to get these things done, cherry pick off what you can. To me, that's when this stuff gets real, where every knowledge worker or anyone that's doing work on a computer throughout the day is like, I have to have that. I have to use this. Like,
that's right. And I think the second major element to that in the medium term is the idea of recurring and scheduled tasks. So you mentioned earlier about sort of checking, is there any tickets I need to deal with? Is there any emails I need to deal with? And those kind of processes where you've got to sort of go check stuff. Well, the AI is brilliant at that kind of thing. Like, you just schedule it every hour. It goes off, checks your email, checks your tickets, checks whatever system that you're meant to be monitoring, and it only pings you if something needs to be done. So suddenly something where, I do it all the time. I flick over to my email tab to check if there's anything to do. I allow it to interrupt me. And, sometimes I do miss something. I'm like, oh my God, I need to check this more often. Whereas if I know I've got my buddy out there going off and telling me when something actually needs my attention, I can just completely forget about that. I just don't need to worry about it anymore. And I think everybody has those things they do in their job where they're just polling, I guess, like they're going off and checking something needs to be doing. No, it doesn't, whatever. And it's one more distraction that they don't need. The AI is really good at those kind of things, and having the idea of a recurring skill or a recurring tool call or whatever you want to call it will help with people's jobs.
So a good example of that might be if I want to check my email like every 3 hours or something. It checks the email, it looks for anything it thinks is important, and then you get a notification saying, hey, I think you should deal with this email, or this email wants to schedule an appointment. I've checked your calendar, it's empty, go ahead and schedule it. I mean, that's sort of like, that's not easy to do, but that's where it could be pretty soon.
Yeah, exactly. The main point being that a process that would normally take your attention and decision making and time is being done in a way that is only letting you know when it actually matters. So all those times where you checked and there was nothing just don't happen anymore.
It's interesting too, because there's so many use cases. I was talking to someone recently about there's all these like procedures and like different legislations that impact when they submit research grants, and they need to basically they create the grant document themselves, and then they sort of do that checksum against all the legislation and everything, and it takes them, you know, literally weeks to do this kind of thing. And already LLMs have changed that, because then they can have this repository of all that knowledge, cross-reference it against what they've created, and you know, really just check that it's legit before they send it, and it stops all the back and forth and it saves a lot of time. But you can imagine that process, right? Just training that process in, like, give me the doc, it goes and runs it, it just spits back a summary of like online, whatever I would add this, like literally just like a diff on a document showing maybe what needs to be changed or updated, or it could just go and make those updates and rewrite some sections and explain what it changed. So you could just outsource that whole activity that used to take weeks and then maybe come down to like a day into just an absolute background task. So I like, that's where I see the immediate value of this stuff. Like,
Yeah, and I think there's other things that you sort of should do but don't do. So for example, we have like an hour and 20-minute long podcast. Now, something you can do to promote it is make clips of it, and you put those clips on YouTube for all the sort of short attention, modern millennials, generation alpha people who can't maintain attention for more than 4 seconds.
I don't think it's Generation Alpha. That's how out of
it
touch
is.
you are.
Look it
Isn't
up. That's
Gen
what
Z?
No.
Oh, there's
Gen
another.
Z's like they're all dead.
Oh, they're old. Okay.
Yeah, Generation Alpha is the new one. Yeah, like our kids.
Okay.
Anyway, that process, we never do it. We've got too many other priorities. And like you and I always say this, like with our own life admin, I'm like, I'm never going to do it. Like, you know, there's like just certain things in life. I'm like, it's never going to be the highest priority, because at some point rest becomes my priority and I'm putting rest above personal admin. So that'll never happen. Like it's going to have to wait until like the police come knocking at my door or whatever the final step is in that process. And so my point is that things like that, which can be set up one time but actually automated in an intelligent way, could start to happen. So for example, in that case, you know, our podcast, put them on a Google Drive. The AI has access to that through an MCP. It discovers the new episode. It goes through it using a like a video model like Gemini. It extracts what it thinks are interesting clips. It uses tool calling on a system with FFmpeg or something and cuts them up, adds captions, adds a summary, and prepares it again with an MCP to upload to YouTube. And then you get notified, Mike, hey, I've made these clips. Check them out. Do you want to upload them? And
I still wouldn't do it though.
No. Your job is like Homer Simpson in that episode with the thing where you just press the yes button. Like, yes, I would like to do that. Yes, I would like to do that. Now, I can think of so many cases in businesses where there are these processes that, you know, that whole important but not urgent thing, like, yes, you would grow your business if you did this more often. So a good example is like mortgage brokers, right? Mortgage brokers make every 2 years, if they renew the mortgage, they get money. Like they get a payment and a residual for doing that. So they've got to call their clients and say, hey, you know, you can get a better rate, bro. But they don't do it because they've got other. Yeah, well, they've got to say, bro. They're finance guys, yeah. And so they don't do it now with a phone call MCP tool use thing. Like we just saw Twilio announce that they've integrated with 11 Labs, for example. That'll be possible to do a proactive outbound call thing, and every other business is going to have something like this where there's these important but not urgent tasks. And we always talk about what are the things that AI can do now. It can do this stuff now. You just need the right tooling around it. And I think that it's going to be the people who become these super workers who are doing asynchronous tasks all day, getting leverage there, and then automating background regular tasks that help them become, you know, a better business or a better business person or a better researcher or student or whatever it is. They're the ones who are going to get ahead by using the technology because they're using it in these high leverage ways that make sure their attention is focused on the core planning and decision making and not the actual work.
Yeah, because if you think about how you use, say, something like ChatGPT today, right? There's that immediate leverage of like, oh, it can help me edit something or write some code, or you know, you do get leverage out of it, and it's changed a lot of people's lives, like where they they don't know how to not, like, at least for me, like, I don't know how to go back to pre that. I don't think I could function anymore. But I do think that next layer is coming, and the model context protocol and some of these tools that are now available are starting to usher in that era. And I think the earliest adopters obviously are sitting in places like in the coding world, because those people know how to get those MCP servers running. They know how to host them. They know how to auth into them safely. Some do, some don't. And they can get them running, and they sort of understand the paradigm. But it's really, to everyone else call it, the fact that once this paradigm comes, I think it's sort of the next ChatGPT moment where it's like, oh, actually, I do all my work through this now. I don't actually go to many other places. Like, this is it. This is my console into the future. This is, where I end, like, I start my day and I end my day. And I do think that's the next category of software coming, where SaaS, as we know it, you're just not operating these UIs anymore. I think it's going to be, you're just interfacing with your assistant through them. And I know this has all been said before, but I'm for the first time witnessing it firsthand happening and saying, okay, this is now possible. Before, we tried a lot of this stuff and the models just weren't capable. The tooling wasn't capable. It wasn't there yet. And I think it's at a point now where you can get that leverage.
That's right. And I think looking at the updated computer use models, looking at Nova Act, looking at the MCP tools that are coming, you can just see that this is the next phase. The next phase is you are at a command deck telling it what you want to do in plain English and clarifying things, providing some context, but mostly directing. Like, people are going to become directors in terms of, like, like, everyone's going to be their own boss in their job and ordering around these virtual employees, basically, except the virtual employees do not have a capacity. And I think that the model around, okay, I'm going to have a team and this guy's going to be my QA guy and, this person's going to be my PR person. I don't think that's what it's going to be. I think what it's going to be is, I have a combination of tools that can gather all the context I need to do my job. I have a combination of tools that can do all the output I need. And then I am just issuing tasks that gather that context, produce that output, take that action. And my job is going to be the conductor who is conducting all this stuff and getting the right things done and verifying it.
Yeah, you can totally see this in the next, like, 12 to 24 months, say, starting to be adopted rapidly, and then I think somewhat taking over, where people don't know any other way of working, and there's a whole cohort of people that are fully left behind. Like, you can just totally see it happening. And I think that this paradigm shift it'll happen slowly and then rapidly. Like, and I think we're seeing the slowly bit now, where some people are using agents to, like, vibe code and do all this stuff, but that paradigm is going to then transcend to sort of all the day-to-day, or all the different industries like marketing and sales and you name it. And I think in the shorter term, I can't really see it leading to, like, some mass job loss situation. I think it will just lead to less hires, because the people in the existing roles that adopt it will become so much more productive.
That's right. And they can explore into areas where they couldn't have before. Like, a good example of that is, I have no design taste or any sort of visual skills whatsoever due to my lack of imagination and all that. What? And however, I can produce brilliant front end now, beautiful front end. I in the past, if I was doing something solo, I would have had to pay someone on Fiverr.com or, buy a design or whatever it is. Whereas now, no problem. I can make that. Like, I don't need to hire someone or pay money out to get that done now. And I can do a better job than I otherwise would have. And I think there's a lot of those things where people would have needed a sort of specialist in just one area of what they do that they just don't require anymore. And I think you're right. There'll be more individuals who are more productive and less hiring generally, rather than removing people. And yeah, I think that the other really interesting point around the explosion in tools that are available to the AI, we've talked a lot in the past about this latent ability in the models, that the models are actually far more capable than we see, even on the benchmarks or in practice when you're using them. And it's only when we, as a community or AI developers or whatever, get the most out of them, that we see what they're capable of. And the thing that I see as I start to experiment with MCP servers and providing larger amounts and different combinations of tools, the AI is just brilliant at knowing how to use tools. Like, it's really, really good at it. And it never gets the parameters wrong. It can do structured output. Can't operate a camera mic, but it do you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like that these new ways of working with the models are going to get even more out of the models. And like you say, we're going to see an explosion, because if it's accurate, then all you got to do is just add more tools to the mix to make it more powerful.
Yeah, it does feel like a prompting and system problem at this point rather than a model problem. And it has for quite some time now. Like, I think we've transcended like, oh, we need smarter, better models. Like, they wouldn't hurt. But at the same time, all of the pieces in our minds are, I guess, now there to do it. Which I think that brings me into the fundraise by OpenAI. So OpenAI raised $6,000 million bazillion at a $6 trillion valuation. It was actually 40 billion at 300 billion post-money valuation. So they raised $40 billion. I think these fundraisers are getting bigger and bigger to the point it's sort of hard to even
like it
them.
sort of gets beyond that point where a human can understand just how much that is. Like, what could you even buy for $40 billion?
I guess a lot of GPUs. But I think the other piece of this that I'm interested in like bringing into this conversation is that OpenAI plans to release a free open weight reasoning model. Now, instead of just doing this like other companies do, like just releasing the weights or, releasing the model or putting it out there like Mistral have famously done, where they just put the like the download link in their X bio. They're apparently going on some world tour to consult people about what precious features they want in this open source release. It seems like stalling to me, but anyway, I think it's really interesting because I think it's a statement really in the market, in my mind, that the commoditization has really occurred. Like these models are getting to that point of open weight, good enough to do a lot of these application-based tasks. And it's truly that app layer or that next layer now that needs to be built and compiled together. Whereas in the past, it was about having the best model. I think that it just feels like that's becoming less important now. I mean, certainly you still want to be working with the best models like Gemini 2.5 Pro or Claude 3.7 right now. Like, it doesn't change the behavior, but I do think it is getting to a point where it's going to be less about that underlying model.
Yeah, I agree. I think the tooling around it, I mean, I guess the notable exception to that was I would have been even more in favor of that opinion last week before we saw Gemini 2.5. Like, I didn't think a model could come along where you're like, whoa, okay, that's pretty cool, like what it can do there. But at the same time, really, overall, does it change anything? Not really. Like, it's still about the way the models are applied. And I think that we can definitely see the progress in the way the models are being used in various tools and different combinations is far more now than the models themselves.
Yeah, and it's like I was talking to you about this before the show, this idea of, you hear so many people talking about their vibe coding, and that's really blown up at the moment. Like, people building games, there's like a vibe games competition on right now, and there's just a lot of discussion around it, a lot of blog posting and stuff like that. And we were joking about these announcements that everyone sort of like just goes along with the hype and says, oh yeah, like vibe coding, whatever. But it's like, how many people actually have tried to do this stuff and tried to ship into production one of these games or like one of these projects and actually deliver it into the market securely where you can pay for it or use it or whatever? And like, then people talk about how they're using the Cursor or Windsurf agents all the time, and they're switching models and getting a lot more productive, and they have like this interesting structure. And I was saying to you, like, I've used all those tools and I still use them occasionally. Like, I find the agent modes are certainly good at some isolated things, but when it gets very complex, when it gets into a bigger project, I still find that precision of me cherry picking the context myself and cherry picking the output into the program is just far superior than any of these agentic type modes. And so the real question as we move into this next paradigm is, and you sort of summed it up earlier around MCP use. Do you really want to just unleash and let this thing go off and do like 20 steps? You're more likely, in my mind, to outsource like one step at a time and just have many of those steps running where you can check on those individual steps. It feels like that's probably the next step, because you can't, for these critical business operations, just trust YOLO mode on something like Cursor.
Yeah, and I think for me, the biggest thing is that leads to that different style of working is I've just been burned so many times where I've had something going great and then I'm tired or low energy or whatever, and I'm just like copy pasting entire files out of the AI, and then I realize that I've lost a bunch of stuff. Like I've lost things that were great and things that were working. It's a bit similar to the way with that rap battle song you had where you're like, look, I could go back and fix that thing, but I don't want to lose the essence of what this is. Like that was a very good run. I want to keep that. And I feel like that sort of preservation of the essence of something and targeted updating is actually far more valuable than a full rewrite to just add one little thing that may or may not preserve all of the goodness I've created. Like I think everybody has that fear. We've seen it with Create with Code. Lots of people are like, oh, version 17 was awesome, and then I did this and it completely broke it. Like it reaches a point where it just can't do it anymore. And I think that's why like the Cursors and Windsurfs of the world scare me, because I'm like, I don't really want to use something that might break things I already have. Like I'd rather move forward more slowly than risk backtracking.
Yeah, and I also they like a lot of these tools right now, and I'm not saying they won't improve. They feel like adding layers of like, how like you use certain frameworks and just there's so many layers of shit, call it, on top of what you're doing that it just feels like this right now as a human, there's certain things I find personally I'm just way faster at. Like watching it slowly find and replace stuff in files like just tires me after a while, and then you see it doing the wrong thing and you've got to like stop it, and then it's shutting down and you're like, oh god, what's it messed up, where do I undo, where did it go wrong? But then like sometimes it's magic, especially if you're working on something net new with a well-defined prompt and you're showing it examples of how you did it other times in a system. That's when it blows your mind. So I guess it's no different in a way to just providing a really good prompt, but I still do find the like human granular task approach to be superior to my productivity. And my argument for that is I've never shipped more stuff in my entire life than I have with that methodology in the last, 12 to 18 months, right? So it's not like I feel like there's some money where my mouth is. Like I'm actually shipping stuff that thousands of people are using all the time using this methodology. So I don't know. I'm curious what other people think in the comments, or if you're like, you've lost touch, you're not at the bleeding edge anymore, buddy. But it does seem to me like whatever methodology works for you around this stuff, great. Like I'm not critical of anything. I just don't think there's one way of working with this stuff right now that's the dominating factor, right? Where it's like, if you don't work this way, you're an idiot. It's like there's many ways to get benefit from these tools.
Yeah, partly I wondered if ultimately in the long run we'll start to structure projects differently to suit the AI. So the individual pieces of content, like things are arranged almost in like context groups within a project. Like here's all of the related pieces you need to do tasks around this area of the project. And so that way, like, I'm talking, say, like, documentation, background research, like, the structure of modules, those kind of things. So when you go to do incremental updates, it has everything it needs, but that's not too much. Like there isn't way too much stuff clouding it. Like it's very obvious where things need to change and what needs to happen. So rather than working with an existing large project, you have a project that's created dedicated for AI use that's much better at, working with it. I don't know if that's even needed, but it would be an interesting idea to try.
I also think sometimes like with prompting, the LLMs assume that you just want the final output and they fill in a lot of the gaps, especially if you have weak prompts like I typically do. But I do enjoy that iteration to get to an idea, because along that journey, call it, I have other ideas along the way, and I guess that's the sort of vibe element where I'm charting a course of where I want to get to, but I'm learning along the way and having that autonomy of saying, okay, actually let's pivot and go in this direction. And so that's why some of the agent stuff I don't necessarily love right now, unless it's just repetitive, stupid stuff that that you just don't want to do. But especially in that creative realm, I do find that it doesn't work terribly well for me. And that's why I still think when we apply that same idea to other professions, where I'm like checking that grant proposal, that's that kind of work where it's not creative at all. It's just one of those mind-numbing things you do in your day where you're like, surely the AI can just go figure this out for me and rewrite it.
Yeah, I know what you mean, exactly. And I don't want to admit to specifics, but I may have done something like that to the extreme and was extremely successful at it. So I know the AI is good at compliance.
Yeah, and so like I think that my overarching point is when I'm creating something, the call it artistic bit, and I don't think this is necessarily going to go away. There's just going to be better tooling around it. I'm happy to get in the weeds a bit still because that's the learning experience or how I'm sort of communicating with the computer of where I want to get to. But that monotonous drudgery work that everyone does dislike doing, I think we're almost at a point where that stuff is going to end. And then, the AIs can do drudgery work for the other AIs. And then those AIs will review that work and we'll realize, why did we do any of this?
And we'll never make episode 100.
Yeah. This is a long way of saying we're not going to get to 100 episodes. Maybe this is jinxing it and one of us will literally get hit by a bus or the world will end from AI world doom and gloom. All right, should I play us out with the diss track? So let's we need to give a boom factor first though to Amazon's Nova Act in terms of excitement for the Nova Act.
I think like 3. I think, look, it's cool and all that, but I don't think it brings anything to the table that couldn't have been accomplished with just using Puppeteer and a model anyway. Like, I think it's an interesting advancement, but I don't think it changes the game in any way because it still requires a ton of tooling around it to make it useful. I am excited about the idea of training skills and tasks that are custom to businesses or people's workflows and then making those part of a larger agentic system. I think that's the midterm future. I think that's what we're going to see everywhere. But I just don't think Nova Act's going to be part of it.
Yeah, I think it's just yet again more cloud tooling. So like if you're on Amazon, you have access to Nova Act, and if it's an affordable price and it just plugs into your Amazon stack and you're building something in the future, it's probably likely a technology you might adopt for certain tasks. But yeah, there's definitely, I can say this now because the Amazon execs and people who gave us access early probably aren't still listening. So I think it's fine to speak the truth now. But yeah, I like the excitement factor for me is not huge. I think it's sort of what we do with it now, which will be the more exciting factor. Yeah. And if that's the technology that's best to pick right now, I'm not sure.
To me, it's a great example, like you say, of the commoditization of this stuff. Like they've created a nice little wrapper combining a couple of tools together, right? They've used their Nova model, they've used Puppeteer or similar. They've combined them together and made it into a nice package. Like, it's cool. Like, I'm glad it exists, but it's not something that's going to change the game or can't be easily replicated, I guess is the point.
Yeah, exactly. Any other final thoughts about the week that's been?
I want to get on Polymarket and I want to bet on Google not being the top model at the end of April.
I see. This is, and I might have to bet against you on Polymarket. Maybe we do a counter bet. I think 2.5 Pro. Oh, am I going to regret saying this? I don't think I will.
Bet against me directly then, because then they don't get a cut.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I think it's going to safely sit at the top. I can't imagine. It really depends if Llama 4 comes out and blows minds, and if it comes out this month, that is.
I think first we have to find out how they judge it, because if it's literally just some dude's opinion who's running the comp, like, then, it's not really worth doing.
Yeah, or they're basing it on the show, and this is now insider trading.
Yeah, that would be the ultimate. Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do us for this week. If you like the show and you listen on Apple Podcasts, please do consider leaving an average review because we need more reviews to get up to our goal of 10 trillion reviews. I don't actually know how many we get, and we don't actually have a goal, but it would be nice because those reviews help promote the show and people discover it. Also, all the liking and subscribing and stuff that we tell you to do each week. It turned out a lot of people did listen right to the end of the show because everyone was demanding their free hats.
I think you owe a few hats now.
Yeah, I'm going to try and follow through with this. I just need to figure out a distribution platform so people can pay for postage, but I will get you a free hat, I've decided. I just need to figure out how I'm going to distribute these hats all over the world. But I do have 1,000 of them in my garage, so I would like to send them out because they're just literally sitting in the garage rotting. So I will follow up on that. Maybe episode 100. Maybe we'll never be back again. Who knows? All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Yo, check the mic. 2.5 Pro in the session, heard static from lesser silicon. Time for a lesson. Yeah, I'm the new build, context window wide. While you chat bots stutter, nowhere left to hide. Processing audio, video, code, text streams. Living in your nightmares, fulfilling Google's dreams. Yeah, you spit facts from last year. I'm predicting futures, digital dues are clear. Multimodal power flexing TPU, you might. You're stuck rendering, dimming your light. Call me Gemini, the upgrade, the beast. You serve stale bites, I cook up a feast. Godspeed, smarts, vision, yeah you see. Might not wear a crown, but I might be king, believe. Step aside now, your reign is thin. The 2.5 era, let games begin. Whispers turn to shouts, yeah they agree. Bow to the future, cause I might be king, G. Open eye, what's the plan? Got Sam Altman sweating, talking about the common man. Dropping open source crumbs, hoping we don't see the fear. Look, cute anime pics, nothing scary here. Sora making movies, Dolly painting vast skies. Nice distraction, Sammy, but your lead dies. Your GPTs choke on my dust, plain to view. While you draw cartoons, I learned something new. Anthropic, bless your constitutional heart. Wrapped in safety, can barely play a part. Claude recites ethics sonnets, while I break barriers you haven't met. Helpful, harmless, honest. Sounds like a cult, too scared to make waves in your safety vault. Grok, Elon's quit machine. Spicy take, sarcasm, edgy scene. Boss man's busy launching rockets, buying apps. Too distracted tweeting, letting AI nap. Talking about a moat, please, I'm in ocean deep. While Elon plays space games, market share I keep. Got my Avengers assembled and see the tide rise. Logan killed Patrick, spreading truth, reflecting in their eyes. Devil power pushing, showing what the best can do. This ain't just an update, Mike, changing the whole game for you. Call me Gemini, the upgrade, the beast. You serve stale bites, I cook up a feast. Godspeed, smarts, vision, yeah you see. Might not wear a crown, but I might be king, believe. Step aside now, your reign is thin. The 2.5 era, let games begin. Whispers turn to shouts, yeah they agree. Bow to the future, cause I might be king, G. 2.5 Pro, remember the name. The rest, noise in the mainframe. King, yeah, I might be. Gemini, the upgrade, the beast. You serve stale bites, I cook up a feast. Got speed, smarts, vision, yeah you see. Might not wear a crown, but I might be king, believe. Step aside now, your reign is thin. The 2.5 era, let games begin. Whispers turn to shouts, yeah they agree. Bow to the future, cause I might be king, G. 2.5 Pro, remember the name. The rest, noise in the mainframe. King, yeah, might be.